boxing versus MMA. This is my part 2 on this. And I hear people talking about, oh, you know, Alex Pereira won his second world title coming straight from kickboxing. And the argument is like, that's okay, right? That's possible. That makes sense to them that a kickboxer could do it, but a boxer could never do it, right? And this, I guess the simple logic is, oh, well, he's kicking in there, right? He could throw knees, right? So it's more relatable to MMA. But not considering the grappling, right? Not considering takedown, defending takedowns, all those things. It's just, oh, he kicks, right? So it's more closer because you just punch. When the truth is that MMA has basically adopted boxing as its main base for standing up. And that's the truth. I mean, all these guys, right? You got Volkanovski, right? Who is one of the higher level boxers in MMA. You got Aspinall, who just won the heavyweight bout, who's a boxer, started boxing, doing jiu-jitsu, spars Tyson Fury. You have Alexa Grasso, right? Who's predominantly a boxing stand-up. I mean, the list, you could go on. Sean Strickland, Sean O'Malley, right? Sean Strickland beat one of the top kickboxers, not just in MMA, but like in the world, which is boxing. But yeah, it's ineffective, right? And what people really want is they want a boxer to come in, pure boxing, no adjustment, and have success. That's the only way you can prove it. But every other sport can adjust. And it's funny because I hear them say, oh no, pure boxing doesn't work in MMA. Pure anything doesn't seem to work in MMA. You have to adjust. Anything you fight a different style would adjust. Even Floyd Mayweather will adjust his style accordingly to his opponent. So when you say pure boxing wouldn't work, are you saying that fighting, like if it's just a boxing match in an MMA fight, wouldn't work? Well, of course not. But that's the same thing with kickboxing. That's the same thing with Muay Thai. Same thing with Jiu-Jitsu. Do you see a lot of guys pulling guard and sitting on their butt and coming at the guy in a guard position? How about Muay Thai stances? Do you see a lot of Muay Thai stances still in MMA? Every style is adjusted. Not a lot of standard karate stances are there in MMA. No, all styles are adjusted to MMA, right? Anything you do where there's a different rule set or something, well, of course, will have to be slightly adjusted. Now, people want, like I said, the fighter to come in and prove it. They want a Tank to come in straight out of boxing and prove it in MMA. That's what they want. Not in any sport do they want that, but that's what they expect from MMA. I mean, that's what they expect from boxing. When the truth is, we can argue, right? Bring a top fighter in, could he have success in MMA? Now, argue that all day. But the truth is, the style itself has already infiltrated MMA. The truth is that when you started, right, you had jiu-jitsu. And jiu-jitsu was so successful because it was the element of surprise. The thing with jiu-jitsu, similar to like when a woman learns Krav Maga, right? Why is Krav Maga a successful defense, right? Self-defense thing. Because it's unexpected, right? It's unexpected attacks that someone is not expecting when they approach someone in the street. Well, that's what jiu-jitsu had. When jiu-jitsu did the first tournament, when the UFC did the first tournament with Royce Gracie, no one was aware of jiu-jitsu. No one knew what it was. It was a surprise. So when it got to the ground, the submissions come, they didn't know what they were looking for. They had the element of surprise. Now, then jiu-jitsu grows in fame, right? Then it grows in popularity. And now it's kind of just like a mandatory, right? You better know some jiu-jitsu when you're in the UFC. Well, now everyone knows jiu-jitsu. Now, of course, there's different levels of jiu-jitsu, but in the UFC, everyone knows something about jiu-jitsu. Everyone knows how to defend certain submissions. Everybody knows how to avoid certain reversals. Everybody knows positioning. So they lost that element of surprise. Now Gracie could never come in and be a world champ in the UFC unless he has a good stand-up, unless he can box, unless he can kickbox, unless he can wrestle. But coming in straight jiu-jitsu is never going to happen again, where a straight jiu-jitsu person is going to win a UFC world title. Especially in men's, because the women, there's not that much, they go in flux of talent, right? So there's like less competitors in the women's thing, but especially in men's, there's not going to be just a straight jiu-jitsu guy who's going to win a world title. Like a Gracie jiu-jitsu guy. It's just not going to happen. So they had an element of surprise. But as the sport went on, and it became a sport, and they put rules to it, and jiu-jitsu was no longer as effective as it once was, because now wrestlers knew what to be aware of. Right now, kickboxers knew what to be aware of, right? And we're learning to defend the takedown. We're learning positioning. We're learning, oh, don't let this guy get in my back. This is how I avoid him getting to my back. It became less effective, right? And then it was just a thing to add on to your game. You needed to have it. But you better be able to stand up. And you had kickboxing, of course. And you had Muay Thai, of course. But it kind of evolved into just boxing, right? It had boxing, and then you added the elbows and the kicks. And you see a lot of the style that comes into it. And I know it's not the pure boxing stance, but it is a boxing stance, and there are boxing punches in there, right? Counter left hooks are a boxing thing. Jabs are a boxing thing. Now, what MMA guys are trying to do is try to say, oh, that's MMA, but MMA is not a style. MMA is a mixture of multiple styles. So the only thing I could really give MMA credit for is like a Superman punch. I didn't see that anywhere else besides in the UFC. It's one of the least effective punches, but yes, they have that. But when it comes to anything else, that is from another style. So you cannot take something from another style and be like, oh, well, that's an MMA tactic. No, mixed martial arts is a mixture of a bunch of different techniques, including boxing. And boxing is prominent, and it's always been prominent. You got Nick Diaz, you got Nate Diaz, you had GSP who dominated the whole UFC with a jab. Anderson Silva who worked on his boxing. You had a whole list of guys who evolved their games from boxing. You could go down to Rampage, Rashad Evans, all these guys worked their boxing, and that was where the game changed, because then getting to the ground wasn't as easy, right? People were able to block that out. Then the fights started turning into stand-up battles. And when they became stand-up battles, you needed to have a good boxing game, right? Because you weren't going to always be able to land the kicks, right? You needed in between, so you needed to be able to work in space and work your way in. And when the guys started learning that, you started getting boxing matches in the UFC. And actually, that's when the UFC's popularity rise, was when you had more stand-up, you had more knockouts, you had better stand-up techniques, right? It was more technical. And you had a guy like Conor McGregor come in who understood spacing, right? Understood counterpunching, and became a massive star, right? Not just due to his personality, but because of his style in the cage. So people are asking, oh, well, boxing can't do. Boxing's already been in there. It's one of the most effective styles in MMA. But you don't want to see it because you think boxing is a rival to MMA. You think boxing is its own thing, but that somehow all these other styles are okay and welcome in MMA, but boxing can never get any credit. You're waiting for a boxer to come and do it when you don't realize that the whole sport has already adopted boxing. It's one of the key bases.